Basic chromaticism is easy to understand. It's based on a diatonic system. The diatonic system has 7 pitches. There are 5 other pitches between these 7 pitches that allow for transposition. Transposition is done with key signatures that maintain the patterns of half steps and whole steps when the beginning notes of the modes are changed. So, if you understand diatonic modes and you know your key signatures, you should understand diatonic music. Chromaticism is easy to spot. It occurs when an accidental outside the key signature appears before a note. These accidentals can create 2 basic effects. They can create half steps, leading tones, where no half step appeared before, or they can produce a change of mode. I'll show you what I mean by using 2 settings by Daniel Jellensberger of the hymn tune Jesu meine Freude that we looked at the end of the last video. The first setting is diatonic and is basically in D Dorian. In order to make it sound more 19th century, Jellensberger conceived the 2nd and 3rd phrases in C major and the 4th and 5th phrases in F major, technically F Lydian. The first and last phrases sound typically modal because they end with a minor 5 chord going to a minor tonic. This means there's no leading tone in the cadence. Except for the penultimate measure, the other phrases sound major because they contain cadences typical of the major mode and because they contain leading tones. The second setting of the hymn tune is in the 19th century style. Notice that the first phrase contains both B flats and C sharps. These accidentals are typical of harmonic and melodic minor. The C sharps add leading tones. The B flat negates the characteristic raised 6th scale degree of the Dorian mode, thereby negating the original mode. The second phrase contains a G sharp. This G sharp resolves up a half step, so it creates a new secondary leading tone. It is as if the piece is in another key, A minor, for just an instant. That G sharp appears at the end of the penultimate phrase for the same reason, and F sharp appears in the 7th measure for the same reason. It's a secondary leading tone to G. In the first video of this series, I created a simple binary piece based on a work by Joseph Haydn. When I created the B section of the binary form, I moved the music up a step without adding any accidentals. This created a special effect, as if the music rose above the original tonic level. The idea was that since the music was hovering above tonic, the audience would anticipate when and how the music would return to the tonic level. Haydn strengthened this effect in his actual work by using chromaticism. He didn't just shift the music up a step, he changed its key. This was accomplished simply by using the accidentals of a new key signature. This is known as modulation. Haydn wanted the music to modulate into E major, so he added D sharps to the 3 sharps already found in the original key signature. While this explains the D sharps, it doesn't explain the E sharp and the A sharp. These accidentals are ornamental, insubstantial, non-structural. Ornamental chromaticism can be applied anywhere there's an ornament. The E sharp is a lower neighbor tone. The A sharp is a passing tone. While ornamental chromaticism may be insignificant, it does produce a kind of special effect, calling attention to the ornament. It's like the special effects you sometimes see in the movies. Fans of the old Star Wars films should be aware of the Lucasfilm logo that appears at the beginnings of the movies. This logo is animated with little glints of light that sparkle off the fake metal of the logo. The fake sparkles are not important, but they add a little life to what would otherwise be a static image. Ornamental chromaticism produces the same kind of effect. If you only use two modes, major and minor, chromaticism is pretty easy to understand. It becomes much more complicated when a myriad of modes is added to the mix. A concept from the writings of Joseph Jasser helps explain how chromaticism works outside the major-minor system. In his 1937 article, Medieval Quartal Harmony, A Plea for Its Restoration, Jasser explained his theory that Western diatonic music had a pentatonic foundation. In his study of approximately 1,600 Gregorian chants, he found that about half were pentatonic. Of the rest, he believed many had pentatonic roots, but that their characteristic minor third gaps had been filled in with ornaments, known as quilismas. Quilismas were originally notated with a special symbol. However, these symbols were often replaced by regular notes in later editions. In other words, what started out as a musical system with 5 pitches and 2 ornamental notes became a 7-note musical system. Jasser learned that a similar system was found in Chinese music, where these 2 ornamental pitches were known as pians. Using the term pian has now become a common way of referring to these 2 extra pitches. We've already come across this idea before when looking at melodies from Dvorak's New World Symphony. These melodies seemed like they were pentatonic, even though they included a few extra notes that are not normally included in the pentatonic system. They were actually pentatonic, but they included the pentatonic equivalent of chromatics, pians. One of the most famous melodies in the Irish repertory is the tune Londonderry Air. I'd like to play it first in its original form, and then play it again, with its pians converted to notes that are actually in the pentatonic scale. While the pians are in the original melody, they don't affect its essential character. The melody is still recognizably the Londonderry Air, even with the pians removed. The point is that the basic concept behind chromaticism is that there is a modal system that contains important structural pitches, and that there are other pitches, ornamental pitches, that can be placed between them. For example, if we start out with the pentatonic scale. We can fill in these 2 gaps with natural notes. These extra notes could be used only occasionally as ornaments, or they could be used consistently, in which case the scale would slip into C major. This allows us to easily change modes, to modulate. We could also fill in the gaps with flattened notes and move into Dorian. Or we could use E and B flat and slip into Mixolydian. Or E flat and B natural and create melodic minor. We could move the other way and start with a 7-note scale, a diatonic mode like Mixolydian. We could remove 2 notes and create a different kind of pentatonic scale. It's Mixolydian with the 2nd and 6th scale degrees removed. It's a kind of Mixolydian pentatonic. We could start with Dorian and take away the 2nd and 6th scale degrees. This gives us a different but still conventional pentatonic scale. To add a note between the 4th and 5th, we would need another level in our hierarchy, one that placed half steps between all of the notes. We could call this level chromatic. We could take one of these chromatic pitches, F sharp, and place it between the F and the G to create a blues scale. This is one of the most common modal shifts in all of popular music. A blues scale has a kind of a trendy sound. It's what we would have called hip when I was young. Transforming a melody using a blues scale automatically gives it that hip sound. And believe me, hip is what you want your music to be. Just as filling in the gaps in the pentatonic system creates another system, the diatonic system, that has its own sound, filling in the gaps in the diatonic system can also create a system, let's call it the 12-tone system, that can also have its own sound. It can have its own sound, but it usually doesn't. Usually these 12 chromatic pitches are subsidiary tones to the 7 diatonic notes. This is reflected in standard musical notation, which is solidly diatonic. These 12 chromatic pitches are notated as altered, raised or lowered versions of the diatonic pitches. When the 12 chromatics are treated equally, a new sound, a new style of music emerges, atonality. We'll talk about that next time.